Hello and welcome back.
Hi, everybody. How you doing, Teresa?
I am doing well, thanks. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm definitely not bored what we're going to talk about today. That's for sure. There's a lot going on right now, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's really funny because, as you know, I'm very busy all the time. Busyness is not the problem for me with boredom, but I'm frequently bored. So I thought it was interesting when we talked about talking about boredom because I think the biggest misperception is that you get bored because you don't have enough to do. So what you just said makes perfect sense. We're busy, busy, busy all the time, but we're so overstimulated all of the time that we don't give our brain a chance to catch up, to sort of process, to think, to heaven forbid, have a creative idea. Right? So for me, what happens is I get bored, but I try to use it. So we'll talk about that. Like what can you do with boredom? Do you get bored very often?
I do, but I think I have probably poor choices when I'm bored. I try to fill up my time instead of just allowing myself to be. I'm like, oh, I got to find something to do, and I always find something to do.
There's always something to do. Absolutely. And I think part of the reason we do, well, there's two elements to this from my perspective. So part of it is we now, because of like smartphones, we don't have to experience boredom if we don't want to. We can immediately find something that's usually a time waster and not meaningful, but it's something to distract us from the discomfort of boredom. The other factor is our society equates busyness with productivity, when in fact that is not true either, right? Being busy all the time does not mean you're producing anything of value or meaning. It just means you're busy. But I think the reason for that, it's uncomfortable. There's many levels physiologically and mentally that you start to experience some discomfort when that emotion of boredom hits. So instead of boredom being about not being busy enough, what it's really about is a lack of interest in what you're doing or the way you're living or in your job. Like it could be anything. Or there's no excitement, there's no little thrill, or you have a desire to be stimulated in some way, right? You need a spark and you're looking for it and you can't find it and you kind of sink into this boredom and then it's like, oh, maybe I don't have any creative ideas. Maybe I can't do anything. You know what I mean? And you get yourself into this state of kind of anxiety. And so I think if we kind of look at boredom a little bit differently, which is what could be purposeful about boredom.
Yeah, it's funny. Now, I'm sure most people don't know this about me, but I have moved a million times in my life. Okay. And part of that is from childhood, part of that is just from being a young adult. And I am bored. I'm bored with where I live. I'm bored with what I'm doing because I come from this background of just constant change.
Yeah.
And this is the longest I've ever lived anywhere in my life. And I've lived in this house for 18 years now, which is insanity. Because before that, I think the longest I've ever lived in one house was maybe 3 or 4 years.
Oh, well,
So
I'd say more like two or three.
yeah, really, really not very long. And I got very used to it. And so now it's like, it's easy for me to get bored because it's just such constant change was happening to me all the time that now I'm like, I get antsy where it's
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
this is too calm. It's too normal. I need more, fluctuation. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's very difficult for me right now. I'm really going through this period of like, I need change,
Yeah.
which most people don't like change, but I love it and I
Yeah.
need it.
I'm the same way for this, probably the same reason. It's interesting because that is one of the discomforts of boredom is restlessness. You have this feeling like you need to take action, but there's no action to take,
There's
right?
nothing to do. That's how I feel. It's like, what can I change? And that's why I'm constantly rearranging furniture. I'm changing paint colors, like redoing my yard constantly because I need it to change.
Yeah, it's well, we get that restlessness. And then there's also mentally a lot can start going on. So if you think about how much we dislike dealing with difficult emotions, for example, most people will do anything to avoid it, right? They don't want to look at it or, something unpleasant that we need to process, but we don't want to process. So we tuck those things down deep and we keep ourselves busy. So when boredom hits, all of a sudden, it's like those thoughts up back up to the top. And that's why many people reach for something to distract them or keep them busy. And you mentioned it earlier, but it's frequently some kind of an unhealthy behavior. That's when people overeat or drink or get screen time, or, that's because you're looking for something to stop that discomfort. I think another thing that happens is we experience some cognitive dissonance. So it's like two different thoughts in our head at once. One is, I clearly need to rest for a moment. Society says that same problem. I'm supposed to be busy. So am I being lazy? Am I, you know what I mean? So you can't hold those two thoughts at the same time. Oh, I need to relax a minute. Oh, I need to be doing something, because that's really the two that are hitting at the same time. And it's uncomfortable.
It's funny because when because now my kids are home right now for summer and my daughter's home from college and my husband is working from home. So there is no alone time, right? And it's interesting. And even me saying this, I feel guilty saying it because it's like, how are people going to see me? But when no one is around, I am totally okay doing nothing. It's so weird. Like if I'm home alone, I'm fine with just sitting on the couch and reading a book, or even really just sitting there. Sometimes I'll fall asleep if I just sit there, but if other people are around, I feel like I need to do something, because if I don't do something, everybody's going to think I'm lazy and I don't contribute and I don't do things, or you know what I mean? It's just this weird mental thing I have.
Yeah. Well, we're conditioned to feel pressure to do something all the time. So if nobody's watching, that's a great exercise people should try, Melissa. No one's around. See if you can just sit for a few minutes and not do anything, because maybe that's all that's driving you to do it all the time. I read a really interesting thing, which was about Isaac Newton, the scientist from way back when. So, and it was interesting to me because of the correlation with us going through the pandemic, which is during the plague. Okay, so we're going way back in history. During the plague, he couldn't leave his house for a very long time. So, and he was very bored. But what came out of that boredom was the brain stopped being overstimulated. And he came up with some brilliant ideas during the plague because he had all that downtime where he didn't have to stay busy all the time, including, I guess he created the foundation for what became calculus.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. So that's like one example I found really interesting, because if you think about all the like artistic people or creative people, the ideas they came up with during the shutdowns when they couldn't work, right? So there was this burst of creativity, whether it was, crazy podcasts or writing a book or writing a screenplay, or like a bunch of stuff we're seeing now came out of that because they had downtime. They allowed their brains to relax, which is, we just don't do it enough. So I thought that was interesting. The same kind of thing happened, which I know you're familiar with from our workshops, but with Albert Einstein. He had like the most boring job in the world as a civil servant for a while, and he was alone in the clerk's office, and he came up with like the theory of relativity. I mean, because then your brain can work. So what I do, I don't know about others, and you can tell me if you agree, but for me, taking a vacation doesn't really work for what I think I want. I think I want to just shut down, relax. Mm-hmm. But what happens is I'm so overstimulated up till the minute I'm leaving for a vacation that it takes me, let's say I get a whole week, it takes me 2 or 3 days to start to relax. And then I start thinking of all the things I want to cram into the next 3 days because I've never been to that place or whatever. And then so I'm overstimulated again. And then I get on a plane to come home. And by the time I come home and come to work the next day, I'm exhausted. A vacation is supposed to be vacating your regular life, which I am in a way, but it's still the overstimulation problem.
Oh, right? I have absolutely zero problem going on vacation. I'm very good at it. My husband and I talk about it a lot. Like, you really do need to take like at least 10 days. 7 days sounds like it's enough, but like you just said, it's really not, because it takes you a couple days to completely unwind and get all that stuff out of your brain. Yeah. And then you need time to enjoy. And then at the very end of that time to enjoy, you start worrying about all the things you have to do when you get home.
Right.
So, you do need and that's not really realistic for most of us. 10 days is a long time to take off. But no, I'm pretty good at letting everything else go. Once I'm in that mode, I can shut it down.
That's good. That's very good. Well, I also know a lot of people, they don't like the boredom sometimes of their vacation. I am perfectly fine spending like once I calm down, but I'm perfectly fine doing nothing, just like watching the scenery or taking it all in, things like that. But and now that I practice mindfulness all the time, of course, it's better because if you practice mindfulness, mindfulness brings you to the present moment. So instead of you thinking about or people judging you or they're going to think you're weird or you're lazy or whatever, you're focusing on the present moment. And if you really focus on the present moment, what starts to happen is you start to get curious about whatever. It could be a thought that pops in your head. It could be something you just saw out the window. You know, it doesn't matter what it is, you're in the now. And that stops a lot of the hyperactive chatter that goes on the minute we stop being busy, busy, busy all the time. But I also think boredom is one of the reasons people give for not wanting to meditate. I suspect that part of that is, again, back to those emotions and thoughts that we tuck away. And what we don't want to do is have those pop into our head. The minute you feel boredom coming on, you're like, no, 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 I don't want to look at that. And so then it's impossible to just kind of focus on your breath and because you're too worried about what you're going to think of or what's going to come up for you.
Well, I got news for you. That stuff's going to come up at some point. So
exactly.
Either at 2:00 in the morning when you wake up in the middle of the night or when you're sitting there bored.
Yeah. Or very inappropriately, which I see a lot in our work, is it comes out with the wrong person. You know what I mean? Like, because it's bubbling in there so long. So, the brain needs rest. We don't give our brains nearly enough. If you think back, say before electricity, we had hours and hours and hours a day, as soon as it was dark, to contemplate, to reflect, to be bored. So I would say mindfulness meditation certainly helps, right? Because it's going to get your mind in tune with being in the present moment. So if meditation, if you're not doing it because you think it's boring, then maybe you could approach it as, well, this is an exercise to see, can I sit with boredom? Can I notice the discomfort without feeling the need to fix it?
Yeah.
And then to see what pops up, because again, some of the most creative ideas or problem solving happens when we're bored because our brain has a chance to organize information and to, maybe process what's happened so far that day instead of piling it on for 18 hours. And then people wonder why they can't sleep. And the poor brain, you finally do go to sleep, hopefully, but then the brain has so much cleaning to do. It probably can't get it all done in the short amount of time we sleep and we start all over the next day.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, especially with creatives too. I mean, when you get your writer's block or that creative block, a lot of that has to do with the fact that you have been so busy and cramming so much into your brain that you're not allowing the space for the creative stuff to come in because your brain is just on hyperactive mode.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm about to take a few days off again because I noticed what happened last time, which was not to go anywhere, just to not have to think and not have to be on. Like I'm always interacting like constantly with other people or getting interrupted or, you know what I mean? So it feels like my brain by the end of the day is smoking. So it's like, okay, I just don't want to think. And I know what will happen because it happened last time. Then all of a sudden, all these ideas start popping into my head of things I would like to pursue or do. I think it's important too, because it can be extremely uncomfortable for some people. So I'm not asking anyone to torture themselves, but there are other things that you can do when you get bored that are a healthy response. Physical activity is one.
Yeah.
If you're bored and you can't stand sitting in it, then take a walk. So now you're doing something that's still relaxing. It's not taxing on the brain, but you're going to get a healthy kind of stimulus. So I mean, that to me is the easiest one. And I will do that when I can't think, when I'm getting blocked. It's like, it'll be the middle of the day. Well, not this last week with 105 degrees, but most days I'm raring to go in the morning and I start getting jammed up by, lunchtime because just too much has gone on. And then I will go, oh, okay, it can be 2:00 in the afternoon. I'll take a walk around the block. It's all it takes. And then by the time I get back, it's like a reset. That's because I let my brain rest.
Well, where do you think it came from that boredom equals laziness? I mean, I know when I think back to when, we were kids and it's like, if we ever told our parents that we were bored, it was like, oh, well, I have something for you to do. So, I think that it's just so drilled into us that like sitting still is not okay.
Yeah.
But I think if we really could try to allow ourselves to be bored, and see what happens, to really try to take those breaks because we don't allow it enough. We really don't.
it's funny you bring up kids because I was thinking in terms of, and I can remember when you guys were little, summers were great until about the last 3 weeks. And then all you guys did was complain about you're bored, you're bored. It was like, and I felt the pressure then to come up with something for you to do.
Yeah.
So we've been conditioned. The boredom laziness link, I think, comes from, again, probably back in the days when we were more agricultural, right? You didn't sit around when
Mm.
you had to sow and reap and, do all the stuff to keep the ranch or the farm or whatever going. Then it was laziness. If you felt like you had to, because you only had daylight hours again. See, that's where I think this is where a lot of this came from. So you only had daytime hours to get everything done. So you did not sit around doing nothing. There was
True.
always, all the chores to do or whatever. So that became sort of the expected, think about like even, Ben Franklin with the early bird thing. It's like everything's geared toward the minute the sun comes up, get out there and do stuff. And then you can sleep when it's dark, right? Or you stop
Yeah.
working when it's dark. We're on 24/7 now, 24 hours a day. And we haven't changed that mentality that we are supposed to be doing something all the time.
Yeah.
That's why a ton of American citizens don't take their vacations. They think it makes them look bad. And it's like, we got to change that because the decisions we make, the actions we take, a lot of them are so not thought through. If you're bored and it's too uncomfortable, then do something you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Like that's an easy fix. And again, if it's, I don't know, knitting or playing the piano or, what, it doesn't matter what it is. When you do something that you're enjoying, different parts of the brain are going to light up again. You're going to get different hormones and you're going to find that the brain resets.
Yeah. I think it's easy to, I mean, I know I use this for my kids, so it may not be like something an adult wants to do, but it really does help. I have a list, when there's those times where it's like, well, what could I do with myself right now? Which I don't get that very frequently because I'm very busy. But for my kids, it's like instead of hearing them say they're bored and I want them to have a different option than technology, I've made a list of all the things that they like to do. You want to go fishing, you want to go surfing, you want to go to the beach, go do something like that. And so now it's easy because they can just look at their list of their options of things that they know they like to do instead of sitting there in boredom and going, I don't know what to do with myself. Then they know what to do. And even for me, it's helpful because when your brain is on that like overload and you really just need a break, the reason you can't think of anything to do is because your brain is on overload. So if you just make it easier on yourself and have that list of things where it's like, these are some of the things I enjoy doing with my time where it makes me feel good and I don't feel like I'm overtaxed, choose one of those things.
Oh, that's a great idea. I know for me, I had to work at this to get out of this. I can't stop at any time because the constant sort of voice running through my head was, you're wasting time. You're wasting time. You're wasting time. And now when I start feeling like that, I think of, okay, how can I waste some time? But I need to waste some time. It's not a waste. I don't really say it that way, but that's really what I'm thinking is, okay, my brain is sending me a signal that I need to stop. It doesn't matter if it's 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. It doesn't matter if none of it matters. What matters is listening to yourself. So when your brain needs a break, you kind of disengage from what you're doing, right? And this is true too when you're doing a tedious task, right? We get really bored with doing something super repetitive and it's like, oh my gosh, this is boring. And so instead of thinking, oh, I'm wasting my time or this is so boring, it's like, oh, my brain is telling me I need a break. So how can I do nothing for a little while? Like, so I start making it like a curiosity game. In what way could I waste a little time right now? Like, you know what I mean? So that it's a lighthearted thing instead of this horrible judgment, which is and it was a self-judgment. I don't think anybody has ever said to me, you're so lazy or anything like that. Right?
No, same. Yeah. Again, that's another thing I think that's just been drilled into us. That's like, lazy, this horrible thing is laziness. And I do think a lot of it is American society, to be honest. But I saw a meme, I think on Instagram, or it doesn't matter, but I saw a meme where it was like, employees in Europe, I'm taking a 3-month holiday. I'll talk to you when I get back. And then Americans, I'm leaving for a doctor appointment that's necessary so I can continue to live. But if you need to contact me, I'll be on my phone. It's like, where did we go wrong?
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely got the message. I started it, probably corporate America or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, it has to stop. I've been toying with the idea of what would it be like to close in the summer.
Mm.
Right. For multiple reasons, but just partly because like for us, we are going nonstop every day. For me, I have to be so strict about the weekends, or I can go straight through, blast straight through the weekend and keep working. And it's like, nope, I gotta figure out a way to get this turned around. And the summer thing I thought of because of Europe. So
Mm.
if you go to Italy or Spain, tons of places are closed. They're closed for the summer. It's like,
Yeah.
what would that be like? Or I think I used to be envious of teachers because, and
Yeah.
teaching is a hard job. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, but how lovely would it be to have a stretch of time really off? As adults, we don't get that.
I have quite a few friends that are teachers, and that's the only thing that keeps them in their position, to be honest. I mean, of course, they love their work and they love the kids, but having that summer break is truly one of the big pulls to being a teacher. Unfortunately, it should be a lot more than that, but it's not with the way that we treat teachers. But yeah.
And I will confess, I tell a lot of the leaders I work with who don't take a vacation, at least take a 3-day weekend, at least take a day off here and there. But for me, what I've discovered is that doesn't do it for me. And it's because I need a longer stretch of time. You know what I mean? Like I need
Yeah.
time to wind down and really just let things, I call it percolating. I feel like I'm a little coffee pot. Things are percolating. Well, I can't percolate if I'm feeling time pressure.
Yeah.
So if it's 1 week off, that's time pressure to me. The more I've been analyzing like my schedule, that I don't have a lot of time for boredom, as you started with this, but I realized it's not even just it's not a number of hours or a number of minutes. It's that I start something and I'm just kind of getting into it, and then I'm interrupted. I either have to attend a meeting, take a phone call, put out a fire, whatever. And then it's like, okay, now it takes me another hour to get back into where I was. And half the time, the second time that happens, I give up on the thing I'm trying to work on because I can't get that. I need that downtime, that focus time, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes it's very boring, right? To have a whole day and you're like, oh, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to keep working on this. But it's like, oh my gosh, but look what's happening because I'm not feeling pressured.
Yeah.
And usually I can push through and then really accomplish what I'm trying to do. So I think there's a lot of value in it. But again, if it's too uncomfortable, then just look at, things like when's the last time you played? Just something playful, something lighthearted, something because we get so tense and tight about our schedules and getting everything done and, run, run, run all the time. It's like, okay, step back, do something playful, do something you enjoy, do something quiet.
Well, and then the boredom allows us to monotask better, so like you just said, crocheting. When you're crocheting, your mind is very focused on the activity of crocheting, and it's very difficult for other stuff to pop in there and
Yeah.
take over. So it really is meditative.
Another thing, and I know no one wants to do this anymore, but if you're feeling bored, call someone. Don't text, don't email. Actually, call another human being, right? Because we don't connect enough anyway. But if you call someone else, I mean, I think we've done this with each other. Just, I'm so bored today. Okay, as soon as you're just having a conversation with someone, you're relaxing, but you're not focusing on the discomfort of boredom.
Yeah.
And that can help you ease into maybe a little boredom time after the phone call. And the last thing I will say that I saw a pattern of, and I caught myself just recently, is I get bored with jobs. I'm sure I'm not alone, but I feel like I might be an extreme case sometimes. And again, because I've had so many changes, constant, not just moving. I think I've had 35 jobs in my
Oh my
lifetime.
gosh.
So I'm so used to switching all the time, right? And I was so proud of myself. I think by the time I was in my 30s, I finally stayed in one place for 8 whole years. But I was so bored with that job and with that building and with that drive. The luxury of doing what we're doing is I have complete freedom to do what I want. So I don't get so bored. But what I've always done in the past, as soon as I start getting that feeling that I'm bored with a job, what I used to do is quit. So maybe it was 6 months in, maybe it was a year in, maybe it was a whole 8 years. And then I learned that if I'm learning something new, so that seems to be one of my problems is once I've kind of mastered something, then I'm bored with it.
Yeah.
So I like the challenge of learning. So I would automatically, after I learned the hard way, like quitting jobs, it's really not that great for me. Go to school, sign up for an online class, learn something new. And so, and again, for me, this wouldn't be true for everybody, probably. For me, learning excites me and engages me. So you might consider that if you're struggling with boredom at work. Instead of quitting your job, think about relationships. Every marriage, there's these long periods of time where you're like bored to death with the relationship or the other person, and it passes. Yeah. Right. So it's the discomfort of the boredom is what causes, I think, a lot of people to split up, where if they just could ride out the boredom, they'd find, oh, it gets exciting again, or it gets, whatever the word is for you. But we do, sometimes I think we just make bad decisions out of boredom.
Well, and we just so happen to have a bunch of classes on our website in case you wanted to learn something new. We do have a lot of online classes, and some of them, I mean, they would be great for relationships, I think. I mean, we've got some communication ones in there and time management. So if you are struggling finding boredom, maybe you need time management. But I think those are that's a great point. I think learning is probably one of my, and like random things. I'll try to learn something that's completely obscure from what is in my normal life. And I think that kind of helps me with my getting bored and lack of change. So
yeah, I was going through a box the other day that I hadn't seen in ages. It was stuffed in the spare room, and I'm like, what is in here? And I had decided to learn astronomy. So it was like instructions for the telescope and what all the constant. And I'm like, I don't have time for that. And I don't have time to go back to school right now either. I hate to say this, but I was getting bored with mindfulness. I don't mean the practice of it, but thinking of ways to come up with ideas or teach or whatever. And so I thought, okay, then why not attend webinars on mindfulness? Like, because I don't think to do something I feel like I already know so well, but to get another perspective then makes it more refreshing and you can get engaged again. So whether you're, an auto mechanic or a professor or whatever, if you're doing the same job, before you just quit, think about, would learning something new, completely different, like you're talking about, help? Would learning something more from a different perspective? But you'll find if you can't sit through the boredom, then do something like that. The emotion of boredom it's an emotion. It will pass. So if we can just learn to kind of allow that uncomfortable feeling, watch how quickly it passes. It could be just a few minutes. It could be half an hour. It's when it's every day you're feeling bored. That means you're not something about your life is not engaging to you. Yeah. And then you do need to take some action so that you can really enjoy the fullness of life. But you don't have to necessarily quit your job or leave your spouse. You can first see, are there other things that you can do that will fulfill you, so that, I think a lot of it is meaning. We want to know we're doing something meaningful. And that to me is the key versus busyness. If you're doing something meaningful and you're engaged in it, you're not going to feel bored.
Yeah.
But you're also not going to fret about taking a break. Right. Or, get that little blip of boredom.
And not everything we do in our lives is going to have meaning. I mean, that's kind of the reality. There's a lot of tedious things that we have to do. But like you said, if you're still not finding anything that's, meaning in your life at all, then it's time to make a change.
Yeah, I will say I've stopped rearranging my furniture. So I know I'm making progress because I had that problem too. You can definitely lessen the discomfort of boredom. You can definitely practice mindfulness to help you take advantage of the boredom. And again, if it's too uncomfortable, there are healthy things that you can do to alleviate the discomfort of boredom. Well, we hope you are not too bored today and you find what you're doing engaging. And if not, we hope we gave you some tips on how to manage the uncomfortableness of boredom. And we hope to see you here again next time.
And if you are in a state of boredom, we do have a giveaway going on. And if you want to head over to our social media, we have some instructions for you on how you can enter that. I'll also put that in the YouTube comments below. And we would love to see you. It's a great little kit. It's got a coloring book, some colored pencils. It's got stickers, a water bottle, all kinds of cool stuff in there. So we would love if you would enter and we can connect with you and hopefully you win.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to other great shows. Visit our website, amindfulmoment.com, to access podcasts, scripts, and reading recommendations. A Mindful Moment is hosted by Teresa McKee and Melissa Sims. This podcast is produced by Work to Live Productions. Thank you for tuning in.